Welcome to the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top founders and experts in the e-commerce industry and take an in-depth look at the struggles and successes in growing e-commerce brands profitably.
Josh Chin here. I'm the host of the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top experts and founders in the e-com industry. We go behind the scenes of the struggles and successes in growing a brand. Now, this episode is brought to you by Chronos.agency. If you run a direct-to-consumer e-com brand that is ready for next-level growth and to scale your customer lifetime value through retention marketing, Chronos is your company. We've helped hundreds of brands scale profits with email, SMS, and push marketing while getting an average of 3,500% ROI from our efforts. Now, we've worked with brands like Truly Beauty, Elias Skin, and Dr. Living Good, and many more. Now, the next step is to email us at sales@chronos.agency, or you can go to chronos.agency to learn more. Today's guest, Matt Orlic, is the founder of Inspire Brands Group, which creates and develops brands worldwide by designing and manufacturing products in several industries, including consumer electronics, sports equipment, toys, sports apparel, and many more. Now, Matt and his team has brought thousands of products in over 10 industries to market in over 100 countries, driving success at every stage from concept to completed product. And Matt and I have worked on a number of brands together and have seen some of the magic Matt and his team has done. So I'm super excited to have him on the show. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Let's dive straight into it. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in entrepreneurship. We were having a little bit of chat prior to this, but give us a rundown.
To give a bit of context, so I started when I was 17, and people kind of deem me as the whore of entrepreneurship, and as to why is that? And it wasn't like I was a high class whore. It was a cheap one, doing rim jobs, $50 on the street, etc. I did everything and anything, everything from outdoor advertising to watches to chocolate to laser clinics. You name it. I think it was over about 20 different companies I started in the last 10 or so years. I think it was more after Wisdom Acquisition. I think I was mentioning to you earlier. It was more just trying to learn and throw myself in the deep end, and I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And about 7 years ago, what we started about 10 years ago was we were developing brands and selling them to mass retailers like bricks and mortar stores. And so we developed 7 brands and hyper niche them in certain categories. Like we're doing power banks. We'd have a brand called Juice Up, just for power banks. We had drones. We did a brand for drones. We had speakers. Sports equipment to sports equipment. So we had multiple brands throughout all these bricks and mortar stores. Then overnight, one of them went bust. It was $1 billion company, and we lost about, $4 to $5 million. I don't know exact figure overnight. So that was a big reality check as to how vulnerable we were, just relying on these bricks and mortar stores. We didn't own the customers, and that's where we made the move to digital, and that's where we had to make that pivot. That's when I started building the team in house and started taking our brands from the distribution model of going to bricks and mortar stores and through to online. And a couple of years on from that, the team that we built, was I think world class, and we started getting requests to help other people with their brands. And then it was more from like a friendship standpoint, people that you meet in the industry, and the agency model. I think we saw that everyone was like a sausage factory, just, churning clients, and the level of serviceability or quality wasn't there, or care. So people were getting burnt left, right, and center. We started helping 1 or 2 clients, and then people just kept referring us to other people. And I guess that agency was kind of formed, but I think, as I mentioned to you earlier, I really don't even like that word agency. I think we're more of a HR company. Like we're really an extension of someone's brand or team. Like our account managers only work for like 4 to 5 brands. They have the time and love and dedication to, spend the time and nurture these accounts and work like directly via WhatsApp or text or with all the owners or the founders or their marketing teams. So, and that's how we got to, I guess, the digital marketing space. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we work pretty well together, and a lot of the common clients that we have. I'm not sure if you know this, but we have close to 80 people on the team at Chronos, but we only have 60 clients. So we actually have more employees than clients. And that really gives us that attention that we need to make every account and every brand a success. Tell me a little bit about your journey into from the beginning, like your mindset at the start versus what you currently have. And tell me a little bit more about authentic money that we were just talking about.
Okay. We're going to deep dive into philosophy.
I want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think I had a realization about 4 years ago when I made the move to Croatia that something wasn't right within me. I just felt like the hustle lifestyle and the constant need for the gratification and success from a monetary perspective, I knew that hedonic adaptation wheel would keep like ruining me and I never would be truly fulfilled. So then I started doing a bit more research and I came across self-actualization, and I understood that was a process that maybe I had to undertake at the time, having achieved all based on Maslow's stuff, all the other stuff, hierarchical stuff. And so I began that process, and there really isn't a structured process to this, right? It's like a highly philosophical term, and I seeked doctors from around the world, psychiatrists, nutritionists, anyone that could add value to this journey and try and help me along the way so I could put the pieces of the puzzle together myself. And one thing that I really did learn was there's a difference in how you make your money. There's authentic money and there's inauthentic money that one of my mentors taught me. And the difference is that authentic money is generated from something that you love so much you would pay the other person to do, if that makes sense. So the easiest probably example I can give to you would be an artist. You know, an artist would happily pay someone to sing in front of an audience, but instead they're paying him. I think a lot of the brands that I developed weren't so authentic to me, and I created a lot of inauthentic money, which was, I guess, was causing some kind of cognitive dissonance within myself, right? And there's definitely part of why I potentially wouldn't have been as fulfilled as I should have been, because I really had everything. I had the freedom, the time, the money to do what I want. I was very young. I was like 28 years old. So there was no reason. I had friends, family. There was no reason for me at all to feel any type of, I don't know what the right word is, maybe negativity towards life. So this was definitely one of the clutch things that I had to try and rewire into my own brain and re-engineer like how I did business. And if I wanted to do business, like what the fuck did even business mean to me? The products that I'd sell, like, you know, the stuff that I'm selling, do I really enjoy it that much? Do I really believe in it that much? Am I using those products every day? And now I'm starting a new brand in the year, which like I'm completely reverse engineering my whole life of business, where it's always very customer centric, right? It's like, do what the customer does. Let's look at trends and this is not the way I'm doing anything anymore. It's more like, what the fuck do I like? And if someone buys it. And surely when you re-engineer your mindset to doing something that's clearly authentic to you, I think the quality and the standards really, it goes through the roof. Like the stuff that I'm doing now, it's hard for, I think, anyone not to want to buy it because it's so authentic to me, to the point where if it's an apparel line, as an example, I'm only doing the best, most innovative, expensive materials. I'm only doing the color black because I only wear black. Like I'm talking about just creating a business for you that's so authentic and so aligned with your life, and not worrying about if anyone's going to buy it. You know, I think just focusing on that product or service is paramount to, you know, potentially living a better human experience. That makes sense.
It's really interesting because at the same time, you're going to be, I guess, repelling a lot of people who and prospects and clients, potential clients that just don't resonate with what you're doing. But you're attracting probably a crowd of raving fans that truly resonate with who you are as a human being and what your business stands for.
Sorry to cut you off, but I think there's a big part to this where people also don't understand, right? It's your company also becomes by who buys your product, and people don't think about this enough. So the person that buys your product is still an extension of your company, and it can affect your company.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, and if you always follow the money, which a lot of companies eventually do, then you're attracting potentially a completely different crowd or aura or authenticity to exactly what your company is all about. And that could also ruin your company. And I've seen it multiple times, that theme happen, where companies are just restructuring and creating products and stuff like that based on where the market is, but not where the founder is and their vision. And I think there's that disalignment as well, which causes a bit of havoc in a person's life.
Interesting. Now, for people listening who might think that, this is probably a trade-off between being successful in a traditional sense and like revenue-wise or making good profits versus being authentic and in alignment of yourself. I don't think that's true. From a first-hand experience and seeing what you've done with the brands that you've worked with and the brands you have created yourself. So let's dive into one of the common clients that we have, and let's walk through that process of how you found success in scaling that brand. And we're talking about, I guess we could define the category as a lifestyle home lifestyle type product.
Lifestyle, yeah. Yeah, I think we spoke about this earlier as well. One thing I realized in the agency world was that we focused on media buying at the start, and then we developed a system called eCom Pentagon, which was 5 pillars. The first one was setting up the attribution as well as you can in this domain, and having your tracking and analytics correct, set up from day one. Number 2 was I think we had the CRO part. Number 3 was the email. Number 4 was the content. And then number 5 was media buying. So media buying really comes in last out of all this stuff, right? The first 4 pillars weren't done to somewhat of a satisfactory level. We couldn't do our job. And when we realized this, we realized that also, if you're going to hire agencies for each separate, I guess, pillar, and they're going to be top agencies, it's very expensive. So we had to start developing all these services in-house as well, just so we could, I guess, make sure that whole ecosystem worked. So then we could do our media buying job and keep our media buying business in a sense. So we ran some services like CRO or email for some clients until we started working with you. All that cost just so our media buying would work. Do you know what I mean? And consulted them on content creation nonstop, which is, I think, more than ever, the Achilles heel for a lot of people these days. So we just focused on that really. And then once we started implementing that whole the eCom Pentagon into people's businesses, it was like, I think in the 1 year we took people from 500 grand to like over 8 figures. Did it 3 times in the first year out of 4 or 5 clients. Took one from 5 mil to 150 mil, as you know. And that seems to be the holistic approach. Like it has to be done. And without that holistic approach, you're really just pushing shit uphill, because what it means is that us media buyers are constantly trying to find tactics in order to get the sales. And this is also a dangerous slope for a lot of businesses, because if you're constantly relying on trying to find tactics, then what does that do? That further enhances your ability to do shit on the other side of the business. Does that make sense? It gives you that leeway to not create a better product or service. It gives you that leeway to not create a better website. It gives you that leeway to not do better emails, because you're constantly finding tactics. So although short term was like a good thing, it was actually a detriment to a lot of people's brands, we realized, because being able to find those tactics just really empowered them to not focus on the other side of the business where they should.
And that's really interesting, because kind of from an intuition standpoint, I would imagine that this, I guess, a secret sauce to success for a 7-figure brand versus an 8-figure brand versus a 9-figure brand, like the one that we worked on, would be really different. But what you're trying to say is that foundationally, you got to have those key pillars in check before you actually switch things on and media buying and scale things to the moon.
Yeah.
Is there is there a phase that brands go through as you bring them from 500K to 5 mil to 150 mil?
Phases in terms of what? What do you mean by that? Sorry.
What kind of is there like an evolution that you see in terms of like a brand just reaching their first 7 figures? This is the typical mindset that people would have versus an 8-figure brand versus a 9-figure brand.
I think the only thing that really changes for the businesses is the confidence they have within their business to invest more in terms of like brand stuff, like content development and their product. And then all that really happens is once we have that model down pat, they just scale vertically or horizontally. They either go into other new markets, right, around the world, or they start expanding their product line now because we have the system in place where they have the solid customer repeat business or depending on what type of business it is. So I think that's the only thing that really changes for them in terms of their mindset. They just started focusing more on, either growing vertically or horizontally.
What about mistakes in crossing that chasm from 7 to 8 figures and 8 to 9? Any common mistakes that you see?
Look, I know of a couple of clients that the difference between, say, the 9-figure client and the 8-figure client was that the level of investment they're prepared to make to upscale their brand. And the only thing that I can really see is the amount of money that the 9-figure brand reinvested into stuff like content and potentially higher macro influences, etc. Where the rest were trying to like keep the profits and take the money out because they're so, I guess, the money wasn't there in the past and now the money's there and I just started taking out of the business rather than reinvesting it. I think that's really the only difference that I've seen anyway from my perspective.
Interesting. And what do you think the future of well, we're taking a leap here, but what's the future of e-commerce and advertising in your space?
For me, it's very simple. It's literally product and content. That is it. Product, content, and influence, I guess, if you want to wrap that in with content. I think media buying is going to become more and more irrelevant as the years go on. Email would fall, I guess, under content as well, but definitely product first, content second. The market's so saturated of everything. Like unless you focus on your product to give yourself some kind of, I guess, unique selling point or a narrative where people can actually buy into, that's probably the most important thing by far.
A good product first and then good content that supports that narrative.
And a narrative, yeah. A product and a narrative. And this is where people go wrong. I think our process for building brands is that we start with a narrative, right? And then with that narrative, then we obviously use different consultants for these processes, but we start with a narrative. After we create the narrative, then we think of the name that's based off the narrative. Once we have the name, then we go for the logo that's built off the name of the narrative, right? And then we start creating a product that synergistically makes sense in terms of the narrative, the logo and the colors and everything else. Where people just go straight away product, and then it's very hard when you don't lay the foundations from day one to then go back and try and re-engineer everything and architect something that's going to be, I guess, true to the product when really the process was disaligned from day one.
Interesting. This reminds me of the whole dropshipping boom that happened in, I think, 2016, 17, 18. Do you think, I guess, do you think that dropshipping is still a viable business model in 2021 and beyond?
Man, I don't know why anyone would want to fucking drop ship. Like, unless they're doing just to learn, I get it. That makes sense. And if you do it with some moral integrity and sell a product that's actually decent and that people, are going to enjoy. But really, end of the day, what equity do you have in a drop shipping business model? You're not developing really any equity. I think maybe years ago, you could fool people into buying drop shipping brands or stores, but I think today, the value of them is dropping significantly. Anyone, unless they have more money than brains, wouldn't really purchase a drop shipping business unless, so there's no real exit opportunity there. But it's a fantastic model to learn, I think, and test for it.
I think that the playing field is kind of leveling and more power is going towards the consumers and there's more choices, transparency, and
sure. And they're getting smarter. Right? They're getting a lot smarter.
And people are getting smarter. There's so many options out there now, and it's just way too difficult to fool a consumer with a shitty product today.
Not just that. Like I've seen stuff for our clients where they use some generic product review images, And you see some of the comments like, this is a generic photo. Do you know what I mean? Like the consumers are even that aware these days. They can tell between a authentic review photo and something that's not authentic. It's just the way it is.
Now, talking about authenticity, if let's say I run a brand that is moderately successful at the let's say 7 figures annually, and I don't have a brand identity, and I don't know where to begin with creating a good narrative that would help me create strong content pillars that would help me scale the business to 8 and 9 figures. Where should I begin?
In terms of creating a new brand, you're saying, or just focusing on your existing brand?
Both.
So like if you have an existing brand, I think it's very important to have a solid brand communication strategy in place. That is, for me, that's a super important for all our brands that we develop in-house and that we work with. Because that is like the structure and the framework in terms of where you do your content, your copy, everything. That we have some consultants we work with. One of them is called, I think it's Synthetic or something. I can give you the link to their website after. You can add in the show notes if you want.
Yeah, sure.
And they help. They're out of Lithuania. I've used them personally for, I think, about 7 of our brands, and I know I've referred them for at least 4 or 5 of our clients, and everyone's been, extremely happy with them.
Synthetics.
I think it's, I don't even know. They changed it. They recently bought another agency, so they rebranded or something. So I'm not sure exactly the name, but I'm sure you can add in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll link them up in the show notes for sure.
So they've been fantastic. We use them for the narrative and the brand communication piece, and then from that's where you stem your identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But without focusing on that narrative, I think your brand's slightly lost, especially in the market today.
But let's talk about the brand that you're planning on launching in alignment with helping other entrepreneurs achieve self-actualization and pairing that up with a fitness apparel line that's coherent with what you believe in. Walk me through that launch process of how you plan to launch that brand.
Yeah, so for that's already 2.5 years in the making. This brand, so it's taken a while. So first of all, I think there's a lot of hesitation on me whether like I really wanted to do it. Was it more around the validation piece, or was it something that I really wanted to do? There's a lot of simulations I had to run personally to make sure that we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly, and this is what I'm going to invest my time and life into. So from day one, we did the same thing. Firstly, we created the architecture around, the narrative. What's the brand about? What does it stand for? And then I started looking at what's, authentic to me in terms of what I use every day, what do I love doing? And because we've had businesses in the past and still do that have licenses to Under Armour and Umbro, from an apparel perspective, I've always been into sports apparel. So the idea was to create sports apparel off the back of this education company, potentially some organic like supplements, like liver supplements, etc. We're creating a vitamin D lamp, a portable vitamin D lamp, because I use a vitamin D lamp when I travel if I don't have sun, etc. So anything that really is like authentic to me, I'm really creating for me, which sounds crazy. Like even for the apparel, I took a designer from Nike, which is very in line with like what I'm trying to do. And it's funny, like we're just so aligned in terms of our beliefs that it just was a perfect match. We're making the stuff, the fabrics from nature. We're manufacturing Italy. I'm not fucking manufacturing China, because in the day, if I don't want to live in the country, like why would I get the country to produce something for me? Does that make sense? Like it's really every step of the way, just trying to, I hate using that word over and over, but like creating something that's authentic, something that's intrinsically motivating to me. So if I make the apparel line, I want it to be black. I want it to be elevated, a minimalistic aesthetic. I want to use the highest quality, innovative, natural fibers possible. So anything that literally I want, that I would use every day, we are creating. And we're going to have a podcast show as well. We hopefully bring a lot of people on in different spaces, from psychology to nutrition, etc. And these are all people that I want to speak to myself anyway, right? Which I enjoy speaking to, and people like yourself. So in the day, there is so much research out there. Once you cross the breakout point of, I think it's about 100,000 US or slightly lower, even 90. Once the head-on adaptation kicks in, there actually is no more joy out of making more money. And that's been proven time and time again. So even with this new business, if I make $100,000 a year, I'm doing all these things that I fucking love, I'm sure I'm gonna be better off than making, this might sound really stupid to people, but $1 million from other boring shit that I actually do not like. I know that everyone, that until you make that $1 million, then you won't know how like realistic what I'm saying is. I get that, because if someone told me that before I made it, I'm like, no, fuck that. If I make $1 million, I'm gonna be fucking cheering. But yeah, that's my internal belief at the moment. Whether that's true for everyone or not, I don't know. But more and more, I speak about this topic, and like I don't even speak about it. Like before the conversation we had now before the podcast, I mentioned something slightly about that, and immediately sparked your interest. And this happens with every single entrepreneur that I speak with, every single one. So there's definitely something there in what we're doing. And the brand's called Me Versus. There's something that we're doing with Me Versus there. We have like biotech engineers, we have neuroscientists that are all part of the company. Everything's validated, all the work we're doing. So yeah, we're interested to see when we go to market, because what we're trying to do is very different, I think, and the language that we use and the narratives that we're pushing is very against what the mainstream is talking about. Because I think even personal development to a certain extent can really fuck you up. I followed all the traditional personal development things in the past, but they lead you to Mars, and then once you get to Mars, you're like, why the fuck did I spend my whole life wanting to go to Mars for? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think came across that study as well. I think it's more at like 80K a year, 80 something K a year.
I think it was done 2-3 years ago. So inflation, it might be like 90 or 100 today or whatever. But yeah, and that is true.
Yeah, it's still, I think it's just, interestingly, coming from a place of like I come from a really modest background. My parents, we grew up in a kind of like a lower middle class family in Malaysia, where I was born and raised. And we went through a whole kind of upheaval of personal and business bankruptcy in the family. We never really bounced back from that. And it was going from doing okay to just doing like shit as a family. And that kind of fueled me for a long time of just, making money to reach a place of financial security and stability. And then once I reached that place, that same momentum kind of propelled me to the next stage and on and on. And I think it's apparent that at some point in time, I will realize that I don't think I'm there yet, but I realize that there has to be some deeper meaning to the pursuit than just chasing bigger numbers, if that makes sense.
And you know what I recommend to everyone, and I've done it, and it's a lot tougher than it sounds. Like I haven't worked for the last 3 years. And that's actually very hard. Like when you spend your whole life like hustling, working 12, 14 hours a day, whatever, and then all of a sudden you like do not work, a lot of shit comes to the surface. And I really believe that we don't create better alternatives for ourselves than to work, right? We have boring lives, which we just sit in the office all day or whatever we're trying to do. We focus on business, and we don't have any other assets on the side to validate what we're doing here, because we have no other option. If you're not working, what are you doing? Like, I don't even know Gary Vee. I'm just going to touch on because everyone knows him, and there's probably not enough context here, but like he speaks about the hustle, everything day. Like, how boring could fucking the rest of his life be if he has tens and tens of millions of dollars and all he could think about doing is sitting in a room with people all day? Like, he hasn't created the alternatives to validate what he's doing in that office. Does that make sense? Like, that's what I realized when I started like skydiving, wake surfing, I was playing music, like I created, or doing shit with my friends, traveling, whatever it is. When I started creating all these different assets in my life, now that had to compete with my work, right? Like I'd rather be doing this or working. But before, it was like, what would I do if I didn't work? Does that make sense? And we kind of get lost, I think, within that, right? And that's what keeps us in there. And then we keep thinking, wondering why we're not potentially super fulfilled or super happy, and we just keep chasing. It's like a drug, essentially, that next hit. And now at least I know whatever I'm doing in my mind, I've validated as much as I can, because I do have other alternatives which I could be doing, which I love doing. And if I really choose to do this one thing, I must really, really fucking want to do it. It's not really just about the money.
And I think that shows in the nature of the relationships that you have with your clients, and what I've seen and observed from an outsider's point of view, and obviously virtually, but it tells that you're there in that relationship because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're working because you want to and not because you have to. That's huge. And I think it's hard to find that in working with an agency, let alone an employee or a partner. So that's incredible. What's your philosophy in exiting businesses? Because I know that you've done a couple of that in the past.
Yeah, I've exited a few in the past. I don't know, like, but then again, like, my mindset now is why would I ever exit a business that I love doing? Like, exiting to me makes no sense in this part of my life now. If the business is truly like amazing to me, like, think about it now, like the business I'm talking about, me versus now, why would I ever want to exit that? If that's everything that's structured around what I love doing in my life, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That should give me energy every day, not me having to force myself to work. So yeah, that's now. But back in the day, it was all around, exiting and building equity within the brands and exiting, because that's when the real payday is. I think, working for profits nonstop, it's tiring and relentless. But exiting is like that big paycheck in the day. It kind of feels like, oh fuck, okay, maybe that was worth it.
Makes sense. What's your advice for brands still on their journey from the 7 to 8 to 9 figure mark, and still in the middle of that growth and the chaos that you know very well? What's your number one advice?
Just focus on content. Focus on content and your product. Focus on content, your product, and that part of your product is your community, your interaction with them. That for me are the real assets for that differentiates businesses today. Digital marketing, I think, can only get you so far today. Obviously, it was a lot easier years ago. You could build a whole business just on your digital marketing skills. But I've seen some entrepreneurs now where they've done it once, one business years ago, and they think they can do it again, but they can't. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's not that simple these days. Can't rely on just Facebook now to bootstrap a business and gets you to that 7 figures, and then you can start. It's very different, I think. So focus on your product and content.
Talking about content, what are some brands that you personally look up to or enjoy on a personal level that produces great content?
That's a good question, but I don't have a really good answer for you.
You're just not a big consumer.
No, this is the problem, right? Yeah, I just don't get consumed much. You're exactly right. So I haven't really been out there consuming much. Like for me, great content is like the Nike's Dream Crazy ad, something that can to move you and take you to a place by watching it. You know what I mean? And inspire you to do it. Anything that's educational, anything that adds value to someone's life, I think for me is good content, whichever way that'd be. Brands that focus on education for me is fantastic, and they get the customer in by giving them some value through an educational perspective. Other brands do it for inspirational or desirable purposes. Brands do it in different ways, but you have an effect with your content on someone personally, no matter which way you have on their life. I think that's the key. Not just direct response, like fucking pumping out, buy. You got a problem, this is the solution.
That works for the short term, and at some point in time, I guess brands have to start that evolution into building a community and a relationship that goes beyond just a transaction.
Yeah, I really do. I really think so. It's hard, it's extremely hard, especially today, because you want to put money in, you want to get money back, and
instantly.
Instantly, and we're used to that, right? And we're in a society that that rewards that consistently. Everything's on fucking demand. And then why shouldn't business be? And especially if you scour Facebook, and this is why I'm not on this stuff. And then you see people posting screenshots of their store doing this amount of numbers and this amount return on ad spend. But you don't know the history or the people behind it. Like, I know one ad account I've got, our ROAS is like 35, but the brand's been around for so long and it's just more, middle to bottom of the funnel. Do you know what I mean? So it looks fucking, if I post that, everyone going crazy. Like, and this is what people do. People are very manipulative online, and because they can hide behind, I think, their keyboards and their screens. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they'd do that. They'd tell the same information if it was like someone's face across a table. But on the computer, they seem to be slightly deceiving. What I've seen founders deceive, and ones that have big businesses and they're burning money every month, but everyone thinks they've got $100 million business and they're going to be the next $1 billion brand, but they can't pay bills. Like, simple. And until I saw it, I no way in the world I would have ever thought that. So yeah, tread carefully out there, I think. And I understand why people don't want to invest in the stuff that we just spoke about, because
it's boring. It's not instantaneous.
Makes sense.
And people I guess people got to be careful about who they listen to and who they get their advice and information from.
This is huge. I think, and in the guru world especially, it's funny. Some of the gurus make more money selling their courses when they're doing their own ecom stores. It's completely fucked. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, how can you teach someone? How can you make money from educational stuff than what you're doing if your own ecom stores? That's amazing and horrible, but that's why it's so hard as well. But then that's such a good job marketing themselves as a personal brand that you buy into it. But I think that's one thing. If someone has to market themselves so much as their personal brand, and they're spending money on that and they're making money from that, I would argue, like, how good are they actually doing at the thing that they're teaching? Because if they were, they probably wouldn't be teaching to begin with, to be honest.
That makes sense. And I guess to some degree, that's also the catch. Like, if they're good enough to teach you, they probably wouldn't be teaching you. But if they're teaching you, you got to be really careful as to, do they have a proven track record? What do their stats actually look like? And why are they out there teaching you in the first place?
This is why I think all they have to do is invest in mentors rather than these gurus. I think mentors are a lot more valuable. I remember I invested at the time when Facebook, I was a bit late to it, but I was paying $10,000 a month for a mentor.
Wow.
This was 5 years ago, right? He was one of the best in Facebook. And for him to take that money and work with me one-on-one, it wasn't one-on-one. I think it was like a little group thing, but we had one-on-one access. That made sense for him to, if he's the best in the world, he's charging that's worth his time, right?
Yeah.
And this to me made sense. And that one-to-one interaction with him and to see what he was doing on a daily basis in, working with some of the biggest people in Facebook in terms of ad spend, everything else. We learned a lot from him at the time. But that made sense. But these courses and stuff like that, and I don't know, the gurus, that to me doesn't make sense. But mentorship does make sense.
I love that. Now, final question. If you had a billboard in the middle of the busiest highway in the world, what would that billboard say?
They would say, it's never what you look at, it's what you see. That's true.
Okay, interesting. Tell me more. What does that mean?
I think it's just general philosophy of life. It's we can't really choose what we look at times, but we can always choose what we see. And I think if you take that abundance mindset into no matter what you do, I think you're going to be ahead of most people.
That's a great way to close. Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. And if people are interested to connect with you, how should they reach out?
Oh, fuck. I don't know if our website still works. And maybe we can put it in the notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The email is hello@inspirebrandsgroup.com.
hello@inspirebrandsgroup.com. If that doesn't work, check out the show notes and we'll have you guys linked out there. The most interesting thing about you guys is that you work for some of the fastest, most incredible brands on Shopify in Australia and some of the common clients they work with. But your website is just so outdated, man. You don't have any of those, amazing logos and screenshots and that all these gurus have.
That's what I was saying. Like we're like in the dark. We're like,
I think for brands that actually discover you guys and end up working with you guys, they're in a really good position. It's like finding a gold mine.
Well, that's what we've been told multiple times. And I think the reason why we keep like that is because we haven't had the need to grow. And we like our clients are all with us for like 3-4 years and they haven't left. Do you know what I mean? I think only 1 or 2 left during this Corona period because of the situation. But apart from that, we keep to a small number of clients that we spend a lot of money with and we love working with. They love working with us. And I don't think we've been onboarded a new client in like a year or two, to be honest.
I love that, man. Yeah. That's awesome. Matt, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being on the show, man.
Legend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the E-commerce Profits Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes.